He gave his last dollars to help a stranded biker no one else would touch. Then, dozens of motorcycles roared into his yard, not for revenge, but to repay a debt. But when a powerful rival tries to shut him down for good, this unlikely brotherhood becomes his only defense. The sun rose heavy over the edge of the freight yard, casting long shadows across rusted trailers and pallets stacked with nothing but air. Carlton Brooks stood in the open bay of his garage, sleeves rolled, grease under his nails, hands deep inside the guts of his battered Peterbilt 379. The hood was propped up with a broom handle, and steam hissed gently from the cracked radiator hose. Again, he muttered under his breath, fishing out the roll of duct tape from the workbench. His tools were old. His lift squealed like a dying animal, and his hands ached from years of turning wrenches without rest. But this truck, that yard, was all he had left since his wife passed away 4 winters ago. June had pancreatic cancer, and no matter how hard they tried to react, it was fast, cruel, and silent, just like her. Carlton never touched the photo of her still taped above the dashboard. He just looked at it when the rig wouldn't start, or when the silence got too loud. By 9 a.m., the sun had burned through the haze, and Carlton wheeled out a table in front of the office trailer. On it, he set down trays of reheated stew, yesterday's rolls, 2 dozen oranges, and a tub of strong black coffee. A dented sign read, "Trucker's Pantry, Fridays only. No questions. No charge." The first to show up was old Ray Hernandez, who used to run reefer loads out of Kansas. Now, he limped in with a cane and a paper cup, nodding in thanks without a word. Then came Scarlett, a single mom whose truck broke down last month and hadn't moved since. Then Jimmy, then Reggie, then 2 others Carlton didn't even know. They came hungry, they left full, and no one ever asked Carlton how he kept the pantry going. What they didn't see was Carlton skipping meals himself. What they didn't know was that the pantry ran on what little he saved from his hauls that were becoming rare, since the Denton boys ran the big contracts now. Tony Denton, founder of Denton Logistics, had grown his company by crushing independents like Carlton. With slick trucks, polished boots, and money to burn, he saw Carlton's yard as a junk pile, an eyesore. For years, Tony had been whispering to zoning boards and city councilmen that the lot was a liability. "It's not even paved," he once scoffed at a public meeting. "And that so-called pantry? It's a food safety violation waiting to happen." But Carlton had something Tony didn't: a memory, a soul. The pantry had started the week after June passed. He had too much leftover casserole and nowhere to put his grief. So he fed a stranger, then another. Then it became a Friday thing. And now, even broke and alone, he couldn't let it go. That Monday, Carlton rolled into a dusty truck stop 2 towns over. His tank was almost bone dry. He counted out the crumpled bills from the glove box, just enough for a half fill. Maybe. As he walked inside, a commotion stopped him in the entryway. A man, mid-40s, long graying beard, leather vest, Hell's Angels patch stitched across the back, stood at the counter arguing with a teenage cashier. "I told you I'll transfer it. My phone just died. No cash. No gas." The kid cut him off. "I don't care if you're Elvis Presley. Step aside, man. You're holding up the line." A few guys in the queue laughed. One pulled out his phone, recording the scene. The biker's jaw flexed, but he didn't raise his voice. He looked tired, dirty, and stuck. Carlton didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, quietly slipped the kid a 20, and nodded toward pump 6. The cashier looked confused. "You serious?" "Yeah," Carlton said. "I've been there." The biker turned, eyes narrowing with disbelief. "You don't even know me, man." Carlton shrugged. "You don't gotta know a man to help him." Then he turned, walked back to his truck, and pulled away without waiting for thanks. By the time he got home, the yard was quiet again. The food table packed up, the pallets back in place. He parked the rig under the half-collapsed awning and turned off the engine. That night, he ate half a peanut butter sandwich and drank water from the garage sink. He didn't tell anyone about the biker. Didn't expect anything to come from it. It was just a small moment, a kindness thrown into the wind. And Carlton Brooks had no way of knowing that somewhere down the highway, a call had already gone out. That a man they called Broken Wing was riding with a plan. and that the rumble of payback was already on the road. Carlton Brooks woke just before dawn to a strange vibration under his mattress. Low, rhythmic, steady. At first, he thought it was a bad dream. Then the coffee mug on his nightstand began to rattle. He sat up fast, heart pounding, swinging his legs out of bed. His boots hit the floor just as the growl became unmistakable. Engines. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Carlton pulled on a flannel shirt and stepped outside, expecting maybe a highway detour or an impromptu ride passing by. But what he saw froze him in place. The freight yard was filling with bikes. Not just motorcycles, machines. Chrome and matte black. Skulls, patches, bandanas, scars. A small army of bikers thundered through his rusted gates, flanked by two flatbed trucks hauling crates, ladders, barrels, and something that looked like a mobile welder. At the front of the pack was the man from the gas station. But now he looked very different. No longer worn and weathered, John Broken Wing Rivers rode with posture, presence, and purpose. He handled his Harley like a king on a throne. He rolled to a stop 10 feet from Carlton and cut the engine. The rest followed in perfect timing. The entire yard fell into a strange, reverent silence. Carlton blinked. What the hell is this? Broken Wing dismounted. He walked over slowly, calmly, offering his hand like they were meeting for the first time. You helped me when no one else would, he said. Didn't ask for a name. Didn't ask for a thing. That kind of thing don't go unnoticed. After Carlton helped John, it wasn't difficult to find his freight yard. It was already known among drivers in the city, and the bikers arrived to help. Carlton stared at the handshake, then up at the crates, the men already unloading. I don't understand. You came all this way to what? Shake my hand. Broken Wing smirked. No, sir. We came to work. Before Carlton could respond, men were hauling lumber off the flatbeds, setting up scaffolds around the pantry. Two women in leather vests rolled out coolers and handed out coffee and breakfast sandwiches to the early risers trickling in from the road. Your canopy's shot, one of them told Carlton as she passed him a mug. We brought corrugated steel. It'll hold up this time. Another rider, an older man with a prosthetic leg and mirrored sunglasses, crouched beside Carlton's Peterbilt. Hose clamps are rusted to hell. We'll take care of that. A third biker walked by holding a replacement CB radio, grinning. Got you something better than that fossil you had wired with duct tape. Carlton couldn't move, couldn't speak. The freight yard buzzed with more activity than it had in a decade. Someone pressure-washed the walls of the trailer. Another team set up fresh paint buckets. Carlton's pantry table was reinforced with new legs. It wasn't just fixing things, it was renewal. By noon, Carlton found himself standing under his newly welded canopy, watching a small group repaint the faded mural on the side of the garage wall. The old one had been sun-bleached beyond recognition, but the new version showed a winding road, a sunset, and the words, "The yard feeds all. No questions. No judgment." He didn't know what to say. Every time he opened his mouth, someone else handed him a tool or offered a story. He learned that Broken Wing had once been a long-haul trucker before an accident shattered his arm and ended his license. That the crew wasn't just bikers. Many were veterans, former truckers, ex-mechanics, wanderers who remembered what it was like to be left behind. Carlton spent the afternoon elbow-deep in oil, side by side with men who didn't ask about his past or his debt. They just handed him parts and worked in rhythm. And when evening came, and the day finally slowed, the freight yard transformed into something unrecognizable. String lights hung from the rafters. Picnic tables, built from old pallets, were lined with paper plates and ribs. Someone had fired up a smoker on the back of a flatbed. Laughter echoed. Carlton stood at the center of it, blinking like a man waking from a dream. He wasn't alone or invisible anymore. Across town, Tony Denton sat in the back seat of his company Suburban, checking emails while his driver, Wallace, navigated the route toward the Denton Logistics Depot. The air conditioning hummed low. Something strange up on Route 6, Wallace said, nodding toward a patch of road up ahead. Old freight yards got bikes lined up like a damn Harley convention. Bikers, flatbeds, couple construction rigs. Thought that place was abandoned. Tony didn't look up at first. What freight yard? The one by the tracks. That guy, Carlton Brooks, used to run loads years back. Now Tony looked. His eyes narrowed. He leaned closer to the window as they passed a glimpse of motorcycles and scaffolding through the trees. He didn't say anything for several seconds. Then, circle back tomorrow. I want a closer look. When they reached the depot, he climbed out stiffly, his usual calm clipped by something sharp beneath the surface. Inside, he called his assistant. Pull everything we've got on Brooks. Zoning history, permit filings, ownership records. I want it on my desk by noon. Down in the shop, Nick Denton wiped sweat from his brow and slid out from under a reefer unit he'd been repairing for most of the morning. A younger tech walked by holding a bag of takeout. Hey Nick, did you see all the bikers over at the old yard? They're building something. Looks like a whole crew out there. Nick sat up slowly. What yard? Carlton's, the guy said. The dude with the old Peterbilt? Thought your dad was trying to buy that land. Looks like it's turning into a community thing now. Kinda cool, honestly. Nick didn't respond. He just nodded, wiped his hands, and turned away, though his mind stayed behind. That evening, he didn't clock out. He just grabbed his torch, threw it in the back of his truck, and drove out toward the edge of town, heart beating heavier the closer he got. By the time the sun touched the hills, the yard was glowing with string lights and laughter. Nick rolled up slowly, quietly. No banners, no gates, just people working like they belonged there. He parked near the fence and walked in. A few heads turned. No one stopped him. Carlton looked up from under a scaffold, surprised but not unkind. Nick lifted his welding torch slightly, the way some men might offer a handshake. You, got anything needs fixing? Carlton blinked, then nodded. Plenty. Nick didn't say another word. He stepped into the light and got to work. Tony Denton had built his empire with clean boots and sharper elbows. For 20 years, he had bought out the weak, paved over the struggling, and wrapped everything else in legal tape. He wasn't used to obstacles, especially not ones that ran on patched-up trucks and goodwill. The sight of Carlton's yard overflowing with volunteers, laughter, and news cameras made his stomach twist. He called the zoning board. No violations. He called the fire marshal. Nothing. He even called an old contact in code enforcement, a man who once owed him a favor but no dice. Everything checked out. Worse, the town was talking. They were liking Carlton's posts online, sharing photos of the mural, and marking the freight yard as a local treasure. The same people who once rolled their eyes at the place now dropped off paint cans, bags of mulch, and coolers full of iced tea. Tony wasn't angry anymore. He was insulted, so he changed his approach. Quietly. First came the health inspector, clipboard in hand, trying to flag the pantry's food storage. But everything had been freshly cleaned and organized. The fridges ran cold. The coolers passed inspection. Next, a property assessor walked through, asking odd questions. Carlton answered with a nod and returned to sanding a bench beside a little girl painting sunflowers on the siding. Tony then sent a private investigator to look into the bikers. Background checks, court records, but most of them had clean slates or long-ago offenses that didn't scare anyone anymore. In fact, more than one of them were veterans. 2 even served on the town's volunteer fire team now. Every shot Tony fired bounced off like pebbles against steel. But Carlton never reacted. He didn't rant, didn't even defend himself. He just worked, quietly. Each evening, Nick Denton arrived just as the sun touched the trees. He never said much when he came, just waved and rolled up his sleeves. One night, he replaced the brake lines on a volunteer's pickup. Another, he helped dig trenches for a drainage pipe near the back of the lot. He and Carlton worked side by side in a rhythm that didn't require conversation. They passed tools, held bolts, nodded once when something fit just right. One night, under a pale yellow shop light, as they finished patching a forklift tire, Nick finally spoke. You know, he said, tightening the last lug nut. My dad's been trying to buy this land for years, said it was too valuable to waste on scrap and charity. Carlton didn't look up. I figured as much. He tried to get me to run Denton Logistics, Nick added. Told me I could triple my salary and sit behind a desk. Said I was throwing my life away if I stayed in the garage. Carlton set down his wrench. And Nick gave a tired half-smile. Told him I'd rather throw my back out doing something honest. They didn't speak again for a while. But something shifted that night, like an old bolt finally coming loose after years of rust. The yard evolved day by day. The pantry table became a full outdoor kitchen. A local barbecue team donated a smoker, and now Friday meals included pulled pork and roasted vegetables. Someone built a shade pavilion out of salvaged lumber. A few retired drivers painted a map of the U.S. on one of the storage containers, marking every route they'd ever driven with red yarn and pins. Kids started showing up after school to help sort parts and paint rocks with cheerful messages. Veterans came too. Old, quiet, steady. They fixed what they could, nodded thanks when handed coffee, and stayed late into the night, welding, sweeping, and watching the stars over the yard they'd somehow claimed as their own. Carlton felt not just useful but connected. Then the letter came. It arrived in a plain envelope, hand-delivered by a city official who refused to meet his eyes. Notice of environmental condemnation. According to the paperwork, traces of oil runoff had been detected in the soil. Enough, apparently, to justify shutting down the lot for public safety. Carlton had 10 days to vacate, remediate, or face full seizure of the land. And this letter arrived without any discussion or hearing. Just an administrative loophole buried in outdated city code. Carlton sat on the loading dock with the letter in hand, watching dusk bleed into night. The yard behind him hummed with laughter and light, the new sign glowing softly over the gate, the smell of mesquite drifting through the air. He read the letter again, then folded it slowly and tucked it into his shirt pocket. Nick found him there a few minutes later. "You okay?" "Not really," Carlton said. "But I will be." He didn't show the letter. He didn't want to cast a shadow over what had become a beautiful thing. But that night, after everyone left, Carlton stayed in the yard long past midnight, sitting in a folding chair, watching the moon move behind a tarp someone had hung as a makeshift roof. He wasn't sure what came next. He just knew this place, this odd, noisy, patched-together place, had become something real, and he wasn't going to give it up without a fight. The notice still hung on the side of Carlton's trailer, taped to the rusted siding, its official seal catching the wind like a flag of surrender. But no one in the yard treated it like a defeat. If anything, the community dug in deeper. By the second day after the letter, a folding table appeared beside the kitchen, covered in clipboards and donation jars. By the fourth day, a mural crew started painting a massive image across the old aluminum fence. A truck cab surrounded by raised hands, palms smeared with grease, paint, and hope. Every day, more people arrived. They came with drills, paintbrushes, firewood, power strips. Carlton didn't ask for anything. He just kept showing up at dawn with coffee and a steady look in his eyes that said, "We keep going." Evenings turned into cookouts. Strangers brought folding chairs. Veterans with faded tattoos told stories around portable heaters. And the kids, the same ones who used to cross the street to avoid the junkyard, now chalked bright drawings all over the driveway. Carlton didn't say much, but his presence was constant, calm, solid, the quiet center around which everything rotated. On day 7, Nick arrived earlier than usual. He walked fast, holding a folder thick with papers and yellowed deeds. His expression wasn't excitement. It was focus, the kind of look a man wears when he knows he might be holding something heavy enough to change everything. "I found something," he told Carlton, pulling him aside. The folder contained old property records, deeds, transfer contracts, but tucked in the back was a copy of a joint ownership document from nearly 15 years ago, one that listed both Carlton and June Brooks as co-owners of the freight yard. And crucially, it showed that any sale required both signatures. June's wasn't on the attempted transfer Tony had filed years back. "It's invalid," Nick said, flipping to the back page. "She never signed. My dad thought he could scare you into leaving before anyone noticed." Carlton sat with the folder in his lap, running his fingers over the edges like it might vanish if he let go. "I don't even know how to fight this," he admitted quietly. "You don't have to," Nick replied. "The paper does it for you." Day 10 came too quickly. The morning sun rose into a hazy sky as a line of black SUVs rolled down the road toward the freight yard. City officials stepped out, A zoning rep, a code inspector, a man in a suit far too clean for a place that smelled like diesel and ash. They expected the yard to be empty. It wasn't. Instead, they were met with a wall. Bikers lined the front fence. Chrome glinting, boots planted, arms crossed. Not aggressive, not loud, just present. Behind them stood townsfolk. Teachers, cooks, janitors, mechanics, veterans, kids with painted signs. One read, "This land fed us." Another, "Condemn greed, not kindness." Carlton stood at the center, arms folded. Nick beside him, the folder in his hands. The lead official cleared his throat, shifting uneasily. "Mr. Brooks, we're here under Ordinance 6A. Carlton handed him the papers before he could finish. "You'll want to read that first." He did, slowly, then again. His face tightened with each paragraph. "You didn't mention joint ownership," the man muttered. "You didn't ask," Carlton said. Behind him, a biker revved his engine, not in threat but in emphasis. The sound echoed across the lot like a gavel. More trucks arrived, news trucks. Reporters stepped out, cameras rolling. Microphones stretched toward the crowd. A local anchor asked a grandmother in an apron why she was standing with bikers on condemned land. "Because I eat here every Friday," she answered simply. "And I don't forget the people who fed me when I had nothing." Tony Denton arrived last. He pulled up in a polished black Escalade, stepping out like a man still convinced the narrative was his to control. But when he saw the wall of people, the cameras, the silent defiance, his face hardened. He strode up to Nick first. "Get in the car," he snapped. "You're not part of this circus." "No," Nick said, meeting his eyes. "I'm exactly where I belong." Tony turned to Carlton next. "This isn't over." Carlton didn't flinch. "It's been over. You just didn't feel it yet." Tony's eyes flicked to the officials, but they were already retreating. One handed the folder back to Nick with a reluctant nod. "There's no legal standing for the eviction," he admitted. "The land's staying right here." As the sun began to set behind the lot, shadows stretched long over the now silent gathering. Carlton walked up the front steps of the trailer. The siding had been freshly painted, the windows cleaned, the ramp reinforced. Above the doorway, a new neon sign flickered to life, handmade by a biker named Lenny who once ran a sign shop in Reno. "The yard open to all." Carlton turned and looked at everyone. No speech, no announcement, just a nod, a small, tired smile. People clapped. Someone let off a burst of laughter. And slowly, the crowd began to settle, grabbing food, swapping stories, cranking music from an old radio as the first stars blinked into the evening sky. Later that night, Carlton stood alone beneath the glowing sign, sipping a cup of coffee. Nick walked up beside him, arms crossed. "You ever think this would happen?" Nick asked. Carlton chuckled softly. "I thought I'd lose everything." "You didn't." Carlton looked out across the yard. "No," he said. "I finally found it." They didn't speak after that, just stood in the glow of something born not from speeches or shouting, but from soup, spark plugs, and the slow, steady hands of people who remembered what it meant to show up. This story reminds us that generosity echoes louder than pride. What would you do if helping someone meant risking everything? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe in quiet heroes, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories right here on Embrace the Journey. See you in the next video.